She was 17 when the papers were signed. 17 when her father said, "This secures our lands." 17 when she learned that security and happiness were not related. Lord Herrick was 12 years older. Wealthy, strategic, politically valuable, cold. She had not understood the last part until after the wedding feast. He had not touched her hand gently once. Not during vows. Not during dance. Not during the carriage ride to his estate. But he had smiled for the crowd. He had looked devoted. He had whispered, "Stand straighter," when she trembled. That had been 3 years ago. Now she was 20, and she knew precisely how to stand straighter. The banquet hall shimmered with candlelight. Crystal, gold, silk. Nobles gathered from across the northern territories. It was the Duke's winter assembly. Attendance was not optional. Her husband adjusted his cufflinks beside her. "You will not embarrass me tonight," he murmured quietly. "I never have," she replied softly. His lips barely moved. "You look pale." "I am tired." Then smile. "Yes, my lord." She did. She always did. They entered together. Music swelled. Eyes turned. Not toward her. Toward him. He was known for his rising influence. She was known for marrying young. That was all. Until tonight. Because tonight, he did not arrive alone. The woman entered moments later. Not beside him, but behind. Not discreet. Not subtle. Intentional. Tall. Beautiful. Confident. Draped in crimson silk. Whispers bloomed instantly. "That's her." He brought her. Publicly. Surely not. Surely yes. Lady Alira had been his companion for months. Everyone knew. No one spoke openly. But tonight, he seated her at the high table. 2 seats from his wife. Close enough to humiliate. Far enough to maintain deniability. "You will endure," he whispered to his wife without looking at her. "I always do," she replied. Her fingers tightened beneath the table. Not shaking. Not visibly. But firm. The Duke entered last. As was tradition, the hall quieted instantly. He did not rush. Did not posture. Did not perform. He commanded space without demanding it. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark-haired. Controlled. His gaze swept the hall once. Calculating. Reading. Noticing. And it paused. Only for a moment. On her. He recognized her. Of course he did. She was the daughter of Lord Ansel Greythorn. A once powerful ally. A man who had died 2 winters ago. Leaving debt. Leaving weakened borders. Leaving her to secure alliance through marriage. The Duke had attended the funeral. She had stood beside the grave. 17 then. White dress. Unblinking. He remembered that. He remembered thinking she looked too young to understand the bargain already being drafted around her. Now she sat 3 years older. Not a child, but not free. His gaze shifted to her husband. Then to the woman in crimson. He did not frown. He did not show reaction. But he noticed. The banquet began. Wine poured. Laughter rose. Her husband leaned toward Alira. Too close. Too familiar. He did not whisper. He did not conceal. He allowed his wife to watch. And she did. With perfect posture. Perfect silence. Perfect composure. Until the music changed. A slow waltz. Couples rose. Her husband stood. Extended his hand. Not to her. To Alira. The hall inhaled collectively. It was not illegal. Not technically. But it was statement. He led the mistress to the center of the floor. Public. Intentional. The wife remained seated. Hands folded. Spine straight. Eyes forward. The Duke watched. Not the dance. Her. Because he had seen that look before. At her father's grave. The stillness of someone holding too much inside. Her chin lifted slightly. Her lips pressed thinner. Her eyes. Lost. Not crying. Not breaking. But close. She did not wipe them. She did not turn away. She endured. The Duke's jaw tightened slightly. He disliked spectacle. He disliked cruelty disguised as confidence. But he did not move. Not yet. Because intervention without invitation created scandal. And scandal did not always protect. The dance ended. Applause. Her husband escorted Alira back to the table. Sat beside his wife as if nothing had occurred. "You handled that adequately," he murmured. "Yes, my lord." "Continue to." "Yes, my lord." Across the room. The Duke's gaze returned again. She felt it this time. A weight. Different from scrutiny. Different from judgment. She looked up. Their eyes met. Only for a second. But it was enough. Because his gaze did not pity. It did not mock. It assessed. And something in that steadiness unsettled her. She looked away first. The evening progressed. More wine. More laughter. More whispered cruelty disguised as normalcy. Her husband leaned toward Elira again. His hand brushed the mistress's waist under the table. Visible. Careless. Intentional. Her breath faltered briefly. Just once. She stood. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Simply. And moved toward the balcony doors. Cool night air hit her face. She did not cry. Not immediately. She gripped the stone railing. Closed her eyes. Inhaled. Exhaled. You should not stand alone. The voice came behind her. Calm. Deep. Controlled. She did not turn. I am not alone. You are. She turned slowly. The Duke stood a few paces away. Not too close. Not inappropriate. Just present. You observed, she said quietly. Yes. You judged. No. You pitted. No. Then why are you here? Because humiliation should not be endured without witness. The words landed unexpectedly. You witnessed. Yes. That changes nothing. It changes acknowledgement. She studied him carefully. You are powerful. Yes. You could intervene. Yes. You will not. Not without your consent. Silence. You would require my permission? She asked. Yes. Why? Because rescue imposed becomes another form of control. The answer unsettled her more than comfort would have. You assume I need rescue. I assume you deserve choice. The wind shifted between them. You knew my father, she said quietly. Yes. He respected you. Yes. He trusted your judgment. Yes. Would he approve of this? The question lingered dangerously. He would regret necessity, the Duke said evenly. But he would not regret alliance. Silence. You believe this marriage is necessity. Yes. You believe endurance is strength. Yes. And you? What of me? Do you believe humiliation builds strength? The question pierced sharper than intended. He did not answer immediately, because the answer was no. But power required patience. And patience required timing. I believe, he said finally, that endurance without strategy becomes surrender. Silence. You imply I surrender. I imply you endure without plan. She looked at him more sharply now. You know nothing of my plans. No, he admitted calmly. But I know what I saw. And what was that? A woman who refuses to break. The words landed differently. You think that is admirable. Yes. You think it is enough. No. Silence stretched between them. Her tears never fell. But they lingered. And he had noticed. Which made him dangerous. Because men who noticed often acted. And she was not yet certain whether she wanted him to. The balcony conversation did not end in comfort. It ended in awareness. She returned to the banquet composed. Her husband did not ask where she had gone. He did not need to. He had seen the Duke follow moments after. And that alone irritated him. You draw attention, he murmured under his breath as she resumed her seat. I stepped outside for air. You do not step outside without informing me. Yes, my lord. His tone remained low. Polished. Controlled. But his jaw tightened when he noticed the Duke's gaze still occasionally drifting toward their table. Not openly. Not challengingly. But observant. The mistress noticed too. Elira smiled faintly across the table. Predatory. Confident. She leaned forward just enough that her hand brushed Lord Herrick's sleeve. You should dance again, she purred. Perhaps something slower. The suggestion was deliberate. Calculated. He glanced at his wife. Waiting. Waiting for reaction. There was none. She lifted her wine. Took a small sip. And did not blink. But something inside her had shifted on that balcony. The Duke's words lingered. Endurance without strategy becomes surrender. She had endured for 3 years. Had that been strength? Or simply survival? The Duke did not remain idle after the banquet. He summoned his financial steward the next morning. I require Lord Herrick's trade records from the past 4 years, he said evenly. On what grounds? The steward asked cautiously. On grounds that I host this assembly and demand clarity among my nobles. The steward bowed. Records were delivered by midday. The Duke did not skim. He examined, line by line. And what he found was not infidelity. It was dependency. Lord Herrick's estates had been failing before the marriage. Heavy debts. Diminished harvest. Risk of crown intervention. Then, 3 years ago, a sudden infusion of funds. Dowry. Land consolidation. Access to Greythorn grain storage. Her father's estate had saved him. Temporarily. The mistress had arrived after the debt stabilized. Publicly tolerated. Privately indulged. Because he no longer feared financial collapse. The marriage had never been affection. It had been acquisition. And now, with Greythorn lands fully absorbed, he no longer needed to pretend. The Duke leaned back slowly. Cruelty, when exposed, rarely surprised him. But humiliation layered upon necessity. That he disliked. That evening, the mistress escalated. Dinner was hosted in a smaller chamber. More intimate. Fewer nobles. More scrutiny. Alira arrived in deep sapphire silk, a color strikingly similar to the wife's gown. Deliberate. She seated herself uninvited beside Lord Herrick before the wife could take her place. "Forgive me," Alira said sweetly, though she did not move. "I did not realize seating was assigned." The wife stood still for one brief moment. A breath. Then she chose the opposite side of the table. Across. Not displaced. Repositioned. The Duke noticed. He always noticed. Midway through the meal, Alira leaned across Herrick's shoulder and whispered something into his ear. Too intimate. Too obvious. Laughter followed. A few guests looked away awkwardly. Others watched eagerly, waiting for reaction. The wife remained calm, but her fingers tightened around her fork. The Duke saw it. He did not look at Alira. He looked at Herrick, and something in his expression cooled further. Later that night, the Duke requested private conversation. Not with her. With Herrick. The meeting occurred in the Duke's private study. Door closed. No witnesses. "You insult your wife publicly," the Duke said evenly. Herrick smiled thinly. "Domestic matters rarely concern you. When domestic matters create instability among my nobles, they do. You exaggerate. You humiliate her deliberately. She overreacts. She does not react at all. Silence. Which frustrates you," the Duke continued. Herrick's smile faded slightly. "You presume much. I observe much. She fulfills her duty," Herrick said coolly. "She secured alliance. She provides heirs. She is positioned correctly." "And affection?" the Duke asked. Herrick scoffed faintly. "Affection does not stabilize borders. Respect does." "Silence. You have no authority in my marriage. I have authority in my court. And your behavior undermines both." Herrick's jaw tightened. "You threaten me? I warn you." "Of what?" "Of miscalculation." Silence deepened. "You rely heavily on Greythorn lands," the Duke continued calmly. "You absorb them." "Yes. And if instability returns?" "It will not." "Are you certain?" The question lingered with weight. Herrick did not answer immediately. The Duke leaned forward slightly. "You required her fortune. You secured it. And now you discard dignity. That is not your concern. It becomes my concern when my assembly turns into spectacle." Silence thickened. "You defend her," Herrick said slowly. "I defend order. And if she complains?" "She is not. And if she does?" "She is not." Herrick exhaled sharply. "She is too proud to complain." "Yes. And too restrained to rebel." Silence. "Do not mistake restraint for absence of thought," the Duke said quietly. Herrick's eyes narrowed slightly. "You overestimate her." "I do not underestimate her." The distinction unsettled him. "You interfere too closely," Herrick warned. "I do not interfere. I observe. And when I observe cruelty disguised as confidence, I respond." The conversation ended without resolution. But Herrick left aware. And that awareness changed something. Meanwhile, in her chamber, she stared at the candle flame. Endurance without strategy becomes surrender. For 3 years, she had preserved dignity. But preserved for what? To be displayed? To be tolerated? To be replaced in public while remaining legally bound? Her father had taught her accounts, land negotiation, supply management. He had not raised her to sit silently forever. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She stiffened slightly. It was not her husband. The knock was measured, controlled. She opened the door. The Duke stood there. Not too close. Never too close. "You requested nothing," he said evenly. "No. You planned something." Her lips curved faintly. "You presume again." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you are not a woman who endures without eventual response." Silence. "And if I choose endurance?" she asked. "Then ensure it serves you." "How?" "Leverage." The words settled heavy. "I have none," she said quietly. "You have Greythorn loyalty. Absorbed. Not erased." Silence. "You have knowledge of accounts." "Yes." "You have understanding of trade." "Yes." "You have visibility." "Yes." "You have pride." "Yes." "Pride is not leverage," she said. "No. But clarity is." He stepped slightly closer. "You are not powerless," he said quietly. "You are positioned. For what? For choice. Silence. And if I choose differently? She asked. Then do so deliberately. Her gaze searched his face. You would support rebellion? She asked softly. I would support autonomy. The difference mattered. You tread dangerous ground, she whispered. I always do. Silence stretched between them. Not romantic, but charged. Because this was no longer about humiliation. It was about awakening. You saw my tears, she said quietly. Yes. You did not look away. No. Why? Because ignoring truth does not erase it. Silence. You are dangerous, she murmured. Yes. And not because of power. Then why? Because you make me question what I have accepted. He did not answer. Because that was precisely the point. And somewhere, across the estate, Herrick sensed shift. The mistress sensed it too. Because humiliation works best when the target remains passive. And she was no longer entirely passive. The fracture began with wine. It always did. The final night of the winter assembly was reserved for the Duke's grand feast. Attendance mandatory, departure delayed until after to ensure unity. Alira arrived in silver silk this time. Not sapphire. Not crimson. Silver. The same shade as the wife's wedding gown had been 3 years ago. Deliberate. Calculated. Cruel. Whispers began before the first course was served. She mocks her. She tests him. She overreaches. The wife entered last beside her husband. Her gown was deep forest green. Not silver. Not competing. She did not acknowledge Alira. That, more than anger, unsettled the mistress. Humiliation requires reaction to feel victorious. Alira leaned across the table mid-meal. My lady, she said sweetly, loud enough for nearby nobles to hear. You must tell me how you endure such restraint. The room quieted subtly. The wife looked up calmly. I prefer precision to excess. A few suppressed smiles flickered down the table. Alira's expression tightened. Restraint can resemble accents. She continued lightly. I cannot imagine living without warmth. The implication hung openly. Herrick smirked faintly, enjoying the spectacle. The wife folded her napkin carefully. Warmth without foundation burns quickly, she replied evenly. A quiet ripple of amusement moved through the nobles. Alira flushed. She had expected silence. Or tears. Not poise. She leaned closer toward Herrick and placed her hand deliberately on his knee. Some foundations, she murmured, are already crumbling. That was when the wife moved. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Strategically. She turned toward the Duke at the head of the table. My Lord Duke, she said calmly, voice carrying just enough. May I request clarification on trade policy? The sudden shift from personal insult to political inquiry startled the hall. The Duke regarded her steadily. You may. I wish to confirm whether consolidated land agreements remain subject to performance review after 3 years. Silence fell hard. Herrick stiffened. Alira withdrew her hand slowly. The Duke's gaze did not move from the wife. They do, he replied evenly. Under what conditions? She asked. Failure to meet export quotas. Failure to maintain solvency. Evidence of misuse of dowry land. The words landed precisely. She inclined her head slightly. And if such conditions are met? Reassessment. By whom? By me. The silence now was no longer amusement. It was tension. Herrick's jaw tightened. This is inappropriate, he said sharply. No, the Duke replied calmly. It is procedural. The wife's expression remained serene. I merely seek understanding, she said softly. And you have it, the Duke answered. Alira's confidence faltered visibly. Because this was no longer spectacle. This was structure. Herrick leaned toward his wife under the guise of adjusting his napkin. You overstep, he whispered. She did not look at him. I adapt, she replied. After the feast, Herrick demanded private audience in his chambers. You embarrass me in public? He snapped once the doors closed. I asked policy, she replied calmly. You implied instability. I confirmed oversight. You suggest I cannot maintain my holdings? I confirm they remain reviewed. His eyes flashed. You forget who you are. No, she said quietly. I remember exactly. Silence hummed sharp. You would threaten me with reassessment. I would remind you that alliance functions both ways. He stared at her. For the first time in 3 years. He saw not a compliant girl, but a calculating woman. You rely on Greythorn grain routes, she continued evenly. You absorb the estate. Yes, but the workers remain loyal to my family. They serve under my banner. They serve under agreement. Silence. You forget that I studied accounts, she added softly. You forget that my father taught me more than posture. His expression shifted. You would undermine your own husband. I would preserve dignity. Silence. And if I withdraw support, he pressed. You cannot, she replied. The certainty in her voice unsettled him. Your exports stabilized because of Greythorn storage capacity. Without it, you default within 2 seasons. The truth struck hard. He had assumed her ignorance. He had mistaken silence for weakness. You miscalculated, she said quietly. The words echoed the Duke's warning. Herrick exhaled sharply. You would align with him, he said coldly. I align with fairness. Do you? Yes. Silence. You believe he would protect you. I believe he respects order. The distinction mattered. You risk everything, Herrick warned. I have already endured everything. The statement held weight. He saw it then. The shift. She was no longer enduring. She was negotiating. The next morning, the Duke summoned Herrick formally. Full council present. No accusations. Just documentation. Export quotas fell short 2 consecutive quarters. The Duke said evenly. Temporary weather issues, Herrick replied. Storage reports indicate underutilization. Silence. Greythorn routes account for 70% of recovery. The nobles murmured. Herrick's composure faltered slightly. You consolidate power recklessly, the Duke continued. Land consolidation does not erase oversight. You would destabilize alliance over triviality? Herrick pressed. Not triviality. Structure. The wife stood at the back of the hall. Silent. Watching. Not rescued. Not displayed. Witness in consequence. You married strategically, the Duke said calmly. You benefited. Yes. You humiliated publicly. That is not chargeable. No, the Duke agreed. But instability is. Silence. Your holdings remain under review, the Duke concluded. Effective immediately. The words were not punishment. They were recalibration. Herrick's power had depended on unchecked absorption. Now it was monitored. And monitoring changed behavior. The mistress did not attend the session. But by afternoon, her departure from the estate was arranged. Discreetly. Suddenly. Without farewell. Cruelty thrives when it feels untouchable. Oversight suffocates it. That evening, she stood again on the balcony. The winter air sharper now. The Duke approached quietly. You chose, he said. Yes. You did not ask me to intervene. No. You used structure. Yes. You destabilized him. I reminded him of balance. Silence lingered. You are no longer 17, he observed. No. You endured. Yes. But you no longer surrender. No. He stepped closer. Not to control. To acknowledge. You risked escalation. Yes. You risked retaliation. Yes. And you proceeded. Yes. Silence stretched between them. You did not need rescue, he said quietly. No. You needed clarity. Yes. And you found it. Yes. The wind shifted softly between them. You noticed my tears, she said. Yes. You did not act impulsively. No. You waited. Yes. Why? Because imposed rescue becomes ownership. Silence. You gave me space to decide. Yes. And now. He met her gaze steadily. Now you stand because you chose. The words settled deeply. Not romantic. Not possessive. Respectful. You altered my course, she said quietly. No. I revealed it. Silence lingered. And what becomes of this? She asked softly. This alliance. He did not answer immediately. Because this was no longer about humiliation, or oversight, or financial leverage. It was about recognition. I do not pursue married women, he said calmly. No. And I do not destabilize without necessity. No. But I do not ignore strength when I see it. Silence deepened. You will not need to endure much longer, he added quietly. Her breath stilled slightly. You assume separation. I assume evolution. The word hung carefully. Everything changes eventually, he said. Yes. And when it does. He paused. Deliberate. I do not look away. The same steadiness as the night of her tears. Only now. There were none to hide. The marriage had not shattered. It had shifted. Power recalibrated. Control redistributed. And for the first time since 17, she did not feel trapped. She felt positioned. And across the courtyard. The Duke did not watch her break. He watched her rise.